Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Malcolm Maestrel and I'm a Membership Services Coordinator with IAAP. Thank you for joining us for our first virtual symposium of 2024. We're very excited to kick off this new webinar format with today's presentation. From community of practice to accessibility culture, growing a culture of accessibility within your organization. But before we begin, we have a few general housekeeping items to go over. Closed captioning is provided. To enable closed captioning, select the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The stream text links for English, French, German, Spanish, and Swedish will be posted in the chat as well, and American Sign Language interpretation is also provided. Microphones are muted to prevent any background noise or disruptions, and we ask that all attendees please post your questions in the Q&A. The chat will be monitored for general dialogue and technical issues. Today's webinar will be recorded and available in our webinar archives, and we will send out a copy of the recording to everyone who registered. And now I would like to turn today's program over to our moderator, Wally Zielinski, who's going to introduce our panelists, Jeff Wiesner and Carolyn Chesler. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you everyone for joining. I know for some of us it's early. I guess it's 9 a.m. for me. It's not that early, but welcome to our conversation today. We're going to be talking about how to grow a culture of accessibility within your org. My name is Wally Zielinski. I've been a front-end engineer for over a decade, so I have a lot of experience with web technology. I got into accessibility, I guess in like 2018, 2019, earned my WAS certification and recently got CPWA certified as well. And I work at a place called Tamman Inc., along with my colleague who I'll introduce here in a moment, where I focus on building accessible experiences for people with all kinds of disabilities, and focused on, the web in particular. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my colleague first, Jeff Wiesner. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Wally. Hi, my name is Jeff Wiesner. I'm a middle-aged white male with short brown hair and glasses. I use pronouns he, him. I'm the Director of Product Management at Tamman, where I work alongside with Wally. And I've been in the tech and web design and development industry for over 2 decades, I guess. And it wasn't until around 6 years ago that I learned about accessibility and started my journey. And I've just really found it so gratifying and rewarding to be able to add this extra layer of value and accessibility to the digital experiences that my teams create. And we'll get into it more soon, but I want to continue on with the introductions.
Thank you. And thank you for that inclusive introduction. I will also mention I'm a middle-aged white male, dark hair, wears glasses. So very similar description to Jeff. I also use he, him pronouns. And then Carolyn, would you please introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Wally. My name is Carolyn Chesler. I am a middle-aged female with shoulder length, blonde to red toned hair, and I have a white collared shirt on. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for having me. I am a senior software test engineer, accessibility team lead at a credit union called BECU, headquartered in Seattle, Washington. Now, I actually have been working with software testing for accessibility since 2014, so around 10 years, but have been in the engineering IT space since 2008. I ended up moving to New Zealand to work as a consultant, where I began working as an accessibility tester for the Department of Internal Affairs there, and I've been working in accessibility ever since.
That's an amazing resume.
Thank
I need to
you.
hear more about that time You said in Australia?
New Zealand.
New Zealand. That sounds amazing.
It was.
Um,
Thank you.
So I'm glad to have these two with me to talk about this like topic of building accessibility. You know, I've been sort of one of those people before where I was the only person at my company who cared about accessibility, and I've also been at places where accessibility was very much baked in, where there was like a whole huge sort of organization around it and within the company itself to promote accessibility. So organizations can take so many different like approaches to this kind of thing, and sometimes it's from the top down, sometimes it's from the bottom up. There's a lot of different ways that it can take shape. But one of the ways that it takes shape for you, Carolyn, at BECU is as this community of practice, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about what that is? What is a community of practice?
Sure. So a community of practice is where practitioners, peers, colleagues can meet in a regular cadence in a safe space to cover our relevant topics affecting the space. In this case, digital accessibility. The COP, we call it, in short, is always on topic. It fosters community. It provides tribal knowledge dissemination and opportunities to broaden your depth of experience. And I should say at BCU, where I work and have worked for the last 5 years, there already was a community of practice in place at work, but not for accessibility until we began that. So that's hopefully that answers your question.
That's really cool. So is it like there's lots of resources for employees to take advantage of kind of thing? Or are you giving trainings? Like what kinds of things does a community practice do?
So because it's specific to the topic or the cohort or group of accessibility practitioners, it's important to note that it's open to all. Anyone in the company can go, because we do have a lot of people joining who are curious, who are interested, who want to know more. But primarily, we have distribution lists that go out. We blast. We do a lot of. We let everyone participate. Really, anyone could participate. We do have. We don't have an accessibility department per se, but we do have. All of our UX, UI division have to be CPAC certified by AAAP in their first year of employment, for example. So they'll all join as practitioners. All of the quality engineers in my division will join because we have dedicated accessibility testers. We're all going to join, but then we open it up to BSAs, to business analysts, managers, and really anyone. People come from all walks of life in the organization. It's wonderful.
That is very interesting. I haven't heard of that particular format before, and it's kind of I like what I'm hearing about it.
Thank you.
So turning it to Jeff for a minute. So you've been at Tamman longer than I have, at least a little bit longer. What's the story of how we got into accessibility? How did we start to formulate some of those like standards and practices for ourselves?
Sure. Yeah, we have an interesting story because in our case, accessibility came from the top down. You're saying there's different ways for it to come into fruition. And one of our owners at the time was really our initial and primary advocate for incorporating accessibility into everything that we made. I remember it was the first day back to work in 2018 in January after the holiday break. And we had an all-staff meeting, and he introduced the topic of accessibility, and he talked about the WCAG, and it was just a lot to take in at once. The Web Consortium Accessibility Guidelines is, if you're not familiar with it, it can be dense and intimidating if you're at your first exposure. Over the years, collectively as a group, we've started to digest it and become a little bit more comfortable with it. But there definitely was a extended onboarding experience for the team at our company. We've had some changeover since then. So we've been able to see the different ways that people kind of learn about accessibility. Some of them come in and they already have previous experience, and so they bring that, like you, Wally, you join the team. I think you were already WAS certified and had quite a bit of experience there, so that's always helpful. And other people joined our team and they just say, like, I kind of have a vague sense of what accessibility is, but I don't know a lot about it, but I'm excited to learn. And then just through our group conversations, they kind of start picking up on it. And it's been kind of organic, but also structured. It's kind of a lot of different options depending on how you enter the company.
Yeah, and we have a lot of resources for people that are joining the team or joining or learning accessibility for the first time, right? We have like a study group where you can kind of take advantage of people's knowledge and expertise, and we kind of organize all the study resources for you, help you like get to that point. So, but we don't have like a strict community of practice in that way. It's a little bit more organic. Do you think that we should strive for having something bigger? Do you think that's something we should try to do?
Well, I'm really interested in this topic because actually being invited to be on this panel was the first time that I'd heard of something called a community of practice. So I'm not sure yet if it's something that we need, but I want to learn about it. I would say that probably, especially because there's such buy-in to how important accessibility is from the leadership team at our company, that maybe right now my feeling is we may not need it because we have so many processes already in place. We have, we encourage people to get IAAP certified, whether it's, regardless of whether you want to get CPAC or WAS or SIPWA, like we support that. We have, like you said, Wally, and you actually lead the study group and have helped people kind of navigate that whole process of studying for and taking the test, and then also getting your continuing education credits. So that's really huge. And we also make sure that everyone at the company, regardless of their role, has some level of familiarity and is kind of enforcing, so to speak, accessibility guidelines throughout their roles. So maybe I'll let you know more by the end of our talk, but right now I think we've got stuff pretty well covered.
Yeah, we'll come back to that question at the end for sure. It's interesting. Yeah, we're lucky because we have leadership that cares deeply about accessibility, but a lot of places don't have that. Certainly been
Yeah.
at places where that's not been the case. Yes, Carolyn, I was about to ask you to jump in.
I'd like to add to this because it's wonderful with the buy-in and everything like that that you do have a discipline, but where do the practitioners go to have a cohort for themselves so that you can have a springboard and go back and forth to what's relevant to you, and you can also have generate that community at large by having others join you too and learn from you. And so we actually began, you should know, from a study group cohort for CPAC study. And we were in there, we realized that we had this cohort, and we noticed that there were a community of practices already set up for other divisions, such as I was in quality engineering, and I would go to it every week, but there was not an accessibility one. And so at one point we decided we should, I was asked actually, why don't you have an accessibility community of practice? And so it fit in that way with our organization. And we already knew we had a cohort from our study group, and we've been doing this already for almost 5 years.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So your company already had this concept of a community of practice, and you guys had a cohort of people who were interested in accessibility, and it just naturally sort of fit where it was like, oh, we can take this stuff we're already doing kind of informally and put it into this sort of format of a community of practice and make it a little bit more official.
Yes, and the format, of course, is something that we evolved or developed ourselves, and then evolved over time just to see what works as a format for our meetings.
Yeah. What is the format? How does that work?
Well, first it's important to always have them planned ahead, because we do want engaging and current and relevant and diverse things that we cover each time, so that it's always fresh and interesting for our attendees and our cohort. And so every time, however, it's divided into segments. And so I begin with news. And that is both internal news from our organization, what is relevant, who's just passed CPAC, for example, this time, and any other news we're from internally, but then at large news. Now I curate that myself, and that segment lasts 5 minutes. Then I have something called a community share, which is something that in the planning phase, I line that up with one of the regular members of the community of practice. I would have them prepare a 5-minute share out of something that is near and dear to them, something that they're an expert on, or something, it could be even something that they want to learn more about that they share. It's just a community share. We also, every single time in our format, have a segment of a main topic. That main topic is going to be a guest speaker, or it's going to be someone presenting something they have learned or something significant, relevant to all of us. Then we also have a disability deep dive segment where we would have one person volunteering during the planning phase before that day, that they would do a disability deep dive session on, and we would do a different disability each time. So those are the segments that we have in our format each session, and it's very important to have them planned out in advance.
That's super interesting. I'm literally taking notes because I help run the study group at Tamman, and it's never, I don't really ever have an agenda. But that's giving me some really good ideas of ways to increase engagement and get people excited, and like have like, hey, just tap someone and say, can you just talk 5 minutes about something you did this week about accessibility? Like, I think that definitely goes a long way.
It does, because you don't want to just have the two. We have Jessica Schultz, who's not present today, and we are co-chairs of the community of practice, and we don't want it to just be our show. It's not just us. It's not for us at all. In fact, it's to facilitate the community of all of the practitioners and non-practitioners alike. And so the sharing aspect of it is essential. It's quite important.
How many chairs, because you mentioned you guys are co-chairs, how many chairs do you have on the COP?
Well, we just have 2 of us. Jessica had been leading our study group before the community practice began. When someone approached me to lead a community practice, I asked Jessica if she wouldn't mind, because it does take a lot of planning and organization, and having 2 does seem to be wonderful. Of course, I didn't want to step on her toes because she's very passionate, and so it really makes sense to collaborate. And so she and I meet and plan before each session, a week before each session, in fact, and we make sure that everything is in order that way.
I like that concept of like shared responsibility. I have a team of people that I rely on as well for the study group. It's not just me. I have like 5 other people that help make that a reality. So I think it's important to kind of spread that responsibility around, because when it all falls on one person, it's never fun. Even if it's something you're super passionate about, then it becomes like this overwhelming thing. So I think it's smart to have a little bit of shared responsibility for sure.
Thank you.
What's been the impact of this COP so far? Like, what changes have you seen within your org?
Changes in the organization. I have noticed that we raise awareness, for one thing, because I collect the DLs, distribution list, and everyone's aware of this. Sometimes people say, "What is that meeting?" And I tell them what it is. So it's important for not everyone just in engineering to understand digital accessibility, and it goes all the way up to executive leadership, really. So awareness is one of the most important things that I think we do. We promote best practices as well. It's very important to do that. We also have a uniform understanding of consistent best practices here, and that we establish, and that we have processes that we follow and everything like that. So we do intend to just cultivate that type of awareness. That I think that's basically what we're trying to do. And there's many ways or strategies that we foster the growth and sustainability of that COP within our organization as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's important to have that level of sort of understanding. And it's great that that's like making such an impact on your org as a whole. So like for Jeff now, since we don't have that sort of super established community of practice sort of thing, how do you feel like we actually accomplish like our goals of incorporating accessibility? How do we end up like doing it as well as we do? Because we don't have that much structure. We have a study group, like there's certain things there, but what do you think is like making that impactful?
Yeah, and also actually, I want to back up a little bit as well, because I feel like this is helpful to talk about, is part of the process of incorporating accessibility into our workflows at Tamman was not just what we had to accomplish internally, but also with our clients, because one of our main clients actually put up some resistance to what we were proposing we wanted to do. And because for them, it sounded like an extra thing that nobody was asking for, that they were aware of, and was going to add more time. And, for example, requesting alt text for images means enlisting a copywriter, and saying that there are issues with contrast means that they have to change some of their colors, especially some of their brand colors. And so there was a lot of resistance there. And it wasn't until they started getting pressure internally, it was actually became a requirement from higher up at their organization, that they then turned to us and said, okay, what's this accessibility thing you're talking about again? Because now we're finding out that we have to do it. So that was interesting. Without that, it could have been very challenging for us to do the things that we needed to do, and where we needed to add more time or involve more people. So we kind of lucked out, I guess, so to speak, and overcoming that milestone. But so that also kind of leads into like, well, how do we incorporate it into our workflow? Well, knowing that we are all holding each other accountable, and knowing that also our client now, thankfully, is holding us accountable, then we have to incorporate that into our design reviews, and into our coding, and into our QA, or quality assurance process. And so everyone is expected to be thinking about accessibility and talking about accessibility every step of the way. Now, our team follows an agile Scrum process. So one of the main steps of intaking work is that we have a refinement meeting. And that's where we talk through the tasks that we're going to be working on. And we have a culture where anyone can jump in and say, hey, is this part going to be accessible, or is that part going to be accessible? And there's kind of like a healthy, like, I don't know if I call it competition, but there's kind of like, you get points, so to speak, for calling something out, where you say like, hey, is that, that's a date picker. Date pickers tend to be keyboard traps. How are we going to make sure that we build this in a way that keyboard users can still navigate it? And so, oh, good point. That's like, nice contribution. Yes, we should consider that. So I think just having it ingrained in our culture I know that's a little bit more organic than having these very established structures or processes, but it just kind of infiltrates our everyday life, I'd say. But Wally, I don't know if you want to add anything there, because you're part of the team.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the culture enforces it. It sort of becomes a self-enforcing thing. In addition to it being a requirement from the client, I do think that's very helpful. I've been at places before where that is like the only reason that we do anything accessibility wise, is because our client has some specific law or guideline or whatever like goal that they are trying to achieve with their digital assets. And so we're like, well, if we don't do it, we're going to get in trouble. So we have to do it for the client. So having that external pressure can also be a huge motivator and a huge help. But yeah, I mean, I think just the fact that everyone is so aware of it. So it's like we're talking about accessibility all the time, even if it's like something small, like, hey, the client wants to edit this like heading on this page. Like there are at least two people usually to be like, that's going to mess up the heading order. Like we should think about this. We should change that. Like people are aware of it and they're talking about it. And it just makes it so sort of part of the air you breathe almost, where it's like impossible to ignore.
Right. And I think, again, we're fortunate in that it's become just such a core part of our company since the co-owner introduced it many years ago. At one point, our slogan on our website was, we build the inclusive web. So we're just putting it right out there in front. And so it's just key to everything that we do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love being a Tamman. Not to be a shill. It's just great having that culture. Um, so Tamman has quite a few people CPAC certified. How do you think that happened? Do you think that was part of that cultural shift of like, we got this sort of mandate from on high kind of thing, like we should care about this, and then suddenly people were like, okay, I'll go get my certification? Or was there something else that kind of motivated people?
Yeah, there definitely was encouragement from leadership to say, hey, we'd love to see some people start getting CPAC certified. We'll pay for it. It was very intimidating though, because there was a cost associated with the exam. And there's also especially for the first people who took the exam at our company, it was like, we didn't know what we were walking into. And it took, some courage to be that first person to take it and say, what if I fail? And the whole company knows I failed, and they put the money out for it, and now they've got to put the money out for me to retake it. Not that it was obviously announced when it was failed, so not that the whole company would know, but there's just this feeling of pressure. But then as more and more people started taking it, and we were giving each other advice and finding resources online, and when someone passes the exam, then they come back to the team, to those people who are studying for it and answering any questions about how to take it and things like that. So all of those things, just again, leadership and also colleagues being supportive and pointing out those resources has really helped with that. It's also helpful to have it in everyone's mind, because when someone first joins the team, if they're still in the onboarding process and we're still getting them kind of acclimated and giving them enough work to keep them busy throughout the day, they know that studying for their certification is also an option that they can do to kind of fill their day or fill their week and start adding value to the team. I think you're muted, Wally.
Sorry.
Sure.
Carolyn, please. I saw your hand up. You want to add something?
Yes, so where I'm working, CPAC is actually something that the practitioners who generally join the community of practice are aware of. In fact, the entire UX group do need to certify with that in their first year of employment, and then I decided to adopt that for quality engineering as well. And so not all of quality engineering, just those who are hired in accessibility, just to clarify. But because a lot of us are aware of this, at my last COP, which was just a few days ago, I found a resource on IAAP website for training for CPAC, which was very fun. It's gamification of it. It was the Jeopardy format, Jeopardy, the game show. And I thought that would be a wonderful exercise. So instead of doing my regular segmented format, I decided to announce and publicize that around in the channels that we're going to have a Jeopardy game for CPACs. What we did was we paired off the people who were already certified with those who are not in teams. And I also was able to get from management prize money guarantee. So $25 for the winning team, each player on the winning team. We then spent an hour at our community of practice meeting learning about CPAC principles and all of those questions so that's like a refresher for those who already took the exam maybe years ago, then for helping the people who are currently studying for it, who are planning to take it. And then it also was really a great thing for those who had never even heard of it. And they still participated and still enjoyed learning with all of us. We had a great time.
I love that idea. Like, especially like, not that you should have to rely on a financial incentive, but certainly giving people a little financial incentive to be like, hey, come to this thing, come learn about this thing we all care about. It gets people moving, gets people involved, and sometimes it's just a little extra carrot, to like be like, come here, learn this thing.
It was just
Um,
smiles, lots of smiles. It was wonderful. Everybody was so happy the whole time. And then the three who actually had the most points, and we were hopefully no one will have negative points at the end of this because we won't be awarding prizes if so. But we all ended up with positive points, and one had the highest point score, and three individuals won prize money.
that's so cool. I'm gonna, this is giving me a lot of ideas for our own internal study group. Very exciting. What do you think? So you mentioned that everyone that works in accessibility at BECU has to earn their CPAC, right? What's been the impact of that policy? Like, has it created more sort of? Go ahead.
Oh, I see the impact of the policy. Actually, I adopted that because I noticed that a manager in UX had established that, and I asked some of the management in engineering if we could establish that for our hires in our department, even those that exist already in the department, and they agreed yes, because in fact the engineering accessibility division is very small. It's only 4 people. However, the UX group is very large, dozens of people. All of those UX people that, in fact, in their first year of employment, it is a requirement in onboarding. And so the impact is tremendous, really. In fact, a lot of people who don't know a lot about accessibility assume that UX owns accessibility in the company. There's no accessibility department. Well, UX owns it. So we need to sort of cultivate an awareness that it's not one division in our company who owns accessibility necessarily. And so I do think that everyone it is the most delightful thing to work with all of these CPAC certified UX people. I have never encountered such good fortune because when we're working together, you don't have to explain to them. They really get it. They really understand it. So it's just it's wonderful to see so many people with that certification. I've never in one organization. So I think that's the main takeaway.
Yeah, it certainly creates like a shorthand with people that I find very useful when talking about problems. Like, I don't have to explain what alt text is. Great, we all know what it is. We all know why it's important. Let's just get to the actual meat of why, like what this alt text should be. Certainly helps a lot, like reduce some of the churn. What about you, Jeff? Same kind of question. Like, we've had a lot of people get certified at Tamman. What do you think? Have you seen a shift from just the certifications themselves?
Yeah, I think especially for individuals who were not as familiar with accessibility once joining the company, if you wait to learn it sort of organically, you're always going to have these gaps in what you're aware of, and you won't really learn it until you encounter it in a situation, and then you're kind of like learning in the moment. So this feels like an ad for certification, but by kind of getting ahead of things and getting more of a general understanding across the board. And also because the certification also covers like not just digital, but physical spaces and things like that. So it gives you kind of a larger context of what accessibility means and what it involves. And then once you're certified, you feel more like, okay, this isn't something I'm on the outside looking in. I'm now a part of this. I'm a part of this community. I'm finding out that I know a thing or two because I'm encountering other people who don't have as much experience as me, and I'm educating them. So I think it really helps kind of bridge that gap and bring people into the fold, so to speak, of okay, you're one of us. Like you said, you already understand the basics. You know what alt text is. You know what color contrast means. Now you're just like, let's solve these problems that we're encountering.
Yeah, totally. So I think probably some people are already thinking about the challenges that they might face if they were to try to set up a community of practice, or get a study group going or something within their own organization. So for either or both of you, whoever wants to jump in first, what are some of the challenges that you guys faced in the early stages? of creating like a community of practice or a study group or anything like that in your work?
Carolyn, you feel like going first?
Sure. I think it was actually two things. One of them was that people already had meeting fatigue, and that they already have so many meetings to go to. And maybe they already also had other COPs, communities of practice, that they are subscribed to, that they are attending, sometimes even required to attend. And so that's another point too. Are you required? Well, in some divisions, in some of the management would say you must attend the engineering COP. And so then you do. So now we're introducing accessibility COP. And so then how do we garner our attendance, our like faithful, loyal every week people now? And that is a challenge. And then of course the other challenge I noticed was in people just being shyness. This means I'm going to have to be vocal and contribute and actually talk on a forum. Are they going to call on me and things like that? So creating a safe space is very, very good. I'm just making sure that it's elective. You do not have to do anything ever. It's all elective and 100% voluntary, and it's more nurture environment, so to make sure that everyone is actually getting something out of it, why they're there, why are you here, and you're going to go away with something that is valuable to you.
Love that.
Thanks.
So, sorry, the question is challenges in setting up a community of practice, because we haven't done that, or just challenges with incorporating accessibility into the workflow.
Getting it, from ground zero, where no one is talking about this, no one's thinking about it. I want to get something. Like, what are some of those challenges of getting a study group started, or a community of practice, or whatever the case may be?
Right. So yeah, once again, we didn't have a lot of those initial hurdles that other organizations may have, because we had that initial buy-in from leadership. But I would say, if I'm remembering back to that, is the WCAG being intimidating, just feeling inaccessible, for lack of a better word, that it's just so, it can seem very obtuse or challenging to kind of make your way through. It's like trying to read a dictionary to some extent, of like, how do I piece this together? So, and because if I'm remembering correctly, I think we had our QA team kind of be the initial primary, standard holders, or like they would kind of like, if it got through everyone else, QA would keep us honest and catch it and then send it back. And so there was this feeling of, this is a bit intimidating and overwhelming, so let's just let QA own it, and they'll just educate us in the moment as we make mistakes. And so that was not healthy in the long run for the organization, because it put a lot of burden on the QA team, and it allowed other roles to feel like they didn't have that responsibility or ownership of it. So I would say, like, trying to counteract that, I would say try to and get people from multiple disciplines and roles to learn about it, and to get up to a certain speed, to then be able to be advocates for other people on their teams or in their roles, rather than isolating it one discipline at a time.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask Carolyn, so like, how do you get information from the COP out to the rest of your organization, right? Like, is there something that you do to share out some of those learnings and get, like, to broaden your reach a little bit beyond just the people that sort of volunteer?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you. I actually do. Let's see. I do think it's important to do that. To sort of not just keep it just the group of us. I think one of our missions is, in fact, to bring awareness to the larger organization. And so, have you ever heard of the term roadshow? So I'll take I'll take our expertise over to another community of practice and say, this is the Accessibility Roadshow. And then we'll talk about some things that we find that they might benefit by, something that they can use and bring it there. Not only a roadshow, but we also I work with the comms, the communication outlets that distribute periodicals to all employees and to certain segments of the organization employees. And so if there's a specific event or something that I want to promote, or maybe I just want to get attendance higher, I will come up with a way, like, this is what we're going to be talking about at the next COP, and then they will put it in that edition for me, and that gets blasted out to a lot more people.
I love that, and the idea of a roadshow is very fun. We sort of started to do that, not with accessibility, but with our monthly demos to our client, one of our clients. We've started doing like a QA, quality assurance. We don't call it a roadshow, but it's the right term for it. Sort of like show and tell, where we talk about some of the ways that we use and leverage automation in our QA process, for example, to help save time and to catch more problems and prevent more things from going to production. And our client loves that. And I think it actually is a great idea to do some of that internally too. Like, hey, here's the designers roadshow on here's some of the things we're incorporating, and sharing their knowledge with the dev team, or whatever. I think that's a great idea.
There's a few other. It's actually it has been effective too in actually getting a lot of people that they'll reach out and say, I didn't even know you did this. This is great, and I learned something. Thank you. And then they'll start maybe joining. And there's a few other types of things aside from roadshows and the comms articles. There's Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I always maybe make sure that we do an event every year, and then we maybe distribute some around in the channels and let people know what the event is, whether it's going to be a company-wide event that they participate in. There was a Ryerson University game maze for not using a mouse, and then of course more prize money and for participating. This was company wide. That was a great one. The most recent May 16 Global Accessibility Awareness Day event, I had my team take a look at our accessibility statement page. This is on the footer of every single one of our websites, and we realized that it was not as resourceful as it could be. So we did a little bit of competitive analysis around in other financial technology organizations, and realized that there was a lot of content we were missing. So we had to go through all of these levels in order to get that content approved. And then before Global Accessibility Awareness Day, it was actually successful and complete. So we, of course, this was something that we could attribute to the community of practice, and then we said it was like a contribution from the community of practice for Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which then brings awareness to accessibility and to the COP.
Yeah, leveraging Global Accessibility Awareness Day is huge. It's funny too. This is like not related at all, but it often falls on my birthday, GAAD, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, because it's like the third Thursday, and it's just nice though. Like, it fell on my birthday again this year. I was like, oh, that's fun.
Well, this year at on Global Accessibility Awareness Day, I was at Nobility Access EU conference, and I was presenting about artificial intelligence alternative text there, and it was just, that was Global Accessibility Awareness Day. But in the meantime, I was just making sure everybody was just doing things to make sure that we have our own GAD Day event, our GAD scrambling to make sure, is it published? Is it there? Is people looking at it? Do they know about it? Everything like that. Was it attributed to the community of practice?
Love it. Yep, it's always so much. It's always a scramble. Okay, I want to get to some of the Q&A, but just to sort of round us out with like one or two last questions. For maybe Jeff, I'll ask you this, but obviously Carolyn, jump in whenever. How can an organization gauge where they are with accessibility and like what they should focus on next?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I'd be curious to hear how either of you answer that, because there's so many different ways to approach accessibility, and it also depends on what kind of work you do, or what, I guess if you're saying the organization as a whole, what, are you creating websites and apps? Are you creating events? Are you doing things like this, like online webinars? Because there's kind of different questions I would ask, or different approaches rather, depending on that. But I would say, as far as gauging where you are, well, one is, what is your team's awareness of accessibility? Because if your team, for the most part, is not aware of accessibility as a concept, or only as a concept, and not how to implement best practices, then chances are you're not accidentally creating accessible experiences for people. So I'd say, like, that might be the first best place to start, is what is everyone's awareness? Certification is one way to gauge that, but I wouldn't say it's the only way. And I would also encourage individuals to be involved in the larger community outside of your own organization, because that's when you can find out about things that maybe, you can get stuck in groupthink, where and maybe that's not the best term for it, but where you all think you know what you need to know, and then you reach outside of your own circle and you find out that there's other stuff that you weren't aware of. So I would say that being involved in the community, that's another, like, kind of thing to check off, and just see what other people are doing, especially if it's related to your own services or your own team's initiatives. But yeah, I'd love to hear what
Yeah.
you have to say.
Oh. I think it's important to not just to make sure that there's a policy in place. Because if not, there would be some gaps around who are that unawareness, or that what we have to make this accessible kind of thing. If there's a policy, and that policy is something that everyone company-wide is aware of, that actually is extremely important. I've noticed gaps as a quality engineer, senior quality engineer, accessibility team lead will have, we'll get my intake form. Usually we get something in advance, but this time we'll get something. It's due tomorrow. We're going live tomorrow. They didn't know that it needs to be accessible. Of course, that's not going to be get to launch now, because our policy does state that everything must meet WCAG current version at level AA. Now, of course, it might be able to go live depending on a couple of different factors. Maybe it's this soft launch, perhaps. Maybe they can delay it and just make sure that all the critical and high ones are fixed, and then launch things like that, and a timeline or thing to fix things that are not low level and medium level. That's okay. Then they can go live. But if they had that policy in place, they would not have gotten to that point, and they wouldn't have been just painful for all those people. It's so a policy is incredibly important.
Yeah, policy is definitely a big one. If I were to answer the question, I would say there's a spectrum between reactive and proactive that I would try to fit things on as well. Like, look at how you're building your products. Are you reacting? Are you like getting notifications that you're failing accessibility, and you're getting pressure to do something because you haven't thought about it before or whatever? Then probably you're at the earlier stages, and you need to like think about awareness building and policy setting. And then if you're like getting a little bit closer to the proactive side, then maybe it's more about scaling, and maybe it's more about like taking what you have that works already and spreading it through more parts of your organization.
Yeah, if I could kind of just jump on that concept, is, yeah, that the whole idea of, like, we call it shifting left, where you're considering accessibility earlier and earlier in the process. So historically, as Wally was saying, accessibility may not be encountered or addressed or brought to attention until, worst cases, it's already out in the public, or whoever the audience for it is going to be, and they start reporting on challenges that they're having, things that are inaccessible. And then there's the reactive, as Wally was saying, versus taking care of it either, in development before it gets to QA, or in design before it gets coded and built, or even better in sales, project management, where sales team is pitching it to the client as this is a feature, this is a value add. Make sure that we set aside time for these accessibility issues, make sure we involve people with disabilities in the design and in the testing of whatever it is that we're building. So yeah, I love your answer, Wally, is like basically doing it earlier and earlier. That's kind of like, that's a great gauge for like, where are you in accessibility maturity?
100%. Amazing. This has been a great conversation with both of you. Thank you so much. I do want to ask, I think, Malcolm, are you able to hit us with some Q&A questions we got from the audience?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's a lovely discussion. It's great to see the kind of different perspectives from a community of practice to growing it through your organization. So we've got a couple questions in the Q&A. Some we may have touched on a little bit during the presentation, but we can definitely expand on them here. We'll start with, how are the employees invited to a community of practice at BECU? Is it self-nomination?
I wouldn't say that it's self-nomination. It's more, it would be, I want to collect distribution lists. So different groups of teams at BECU have their own alias that I can email. So one alias would have a group of 10 to 100 or more individuals. So I will identify which distribution lists I would like to send. And then, of course, then it's elective, it's optional. Those people can accept or reject that invitation. If they do accept it or say tentative to it, then they'll keep getting the notification that the meeting is going to happen when it is going to happen on an ongoing level. And if they don't wish to, they of course would say decline, and then they will no longer receive it.
Thank you. And maybe Wally or Jeff, you could touch on this kind of within your organization, like Wally with the CPAC study group. Are those people invited to join, or is it kind of something that happens a little
Yeah,
more naturally when they're studying for the certification?
it's a great question. So we have, the study group happens bi-weekly, so every other week, and it's like a brief meeting, but we have, whenever someone new joins the team, they get a notification like, hey, we have this study group available. Here's the link to the calendar invite. If you want to add it to your calendar, you can. And then it just recurs, and whoever wants to show up can. We also have a Slack channel where we, talk about the certification process, talk about accessibility questions and things of that nature. And so people are invited to join that channel if they're interested in that topic. So people opt in, but we very much encourage it. Like, it's very much part of, it comes from, leadership. That's like, we care about this. If you want to get your certification, we will support you in doing that. And so we just provide as much of the material and the tools and the sort of best practices and like things we've learned from getting certified ourselves, and just give them all the tools that they need, and then sort of be like, you're free, please do it if you can. Jeff, you want to add?
Yeah, if I could I'll add to that is, yeah, I think it's great that we have a number of ways that members of our team can start becoming exposed to accessibility, whether it's just listening in on the conversations that happen during refinement, for example. While you mentioned our accessibility Slack channel, so there's an internal channel within our company, and then there's also an external channel that we encourage people to join, which is, it's pretty large. I think, Wally, you're a member of that public Slack.
Oh, the web accessibility Slack. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have that internal and external. Periodically we do a book group during lunch, and typically around disability. And then for the study group, people can join and just kind of listen in and not necessarily have a commitment to, I am taking the test and I'm going to take it at this time. So there's a number of ways to kind of get your feet wet and just kind of start to lurk a little bit without coming right out and saying, like, making a commitment or making a proclamation of like, I will be, involved in this way. So I think, yeah, having a number of different avenues to getting acclimated is super helpful.
Great. Thank you all for your input. Our next question is for Carolyn. What type of teams or representation do you have on the community of practice? Is it only product and engineering or more broad teams? And do you know about how many people are in the COP right now? Is it rotated annually?
It's not rotated ever. It actually fluctuates a little bit, but we have I would say 20 people or so in the organization. This is an organization again where we do have some meeting fatigue. It is also an organization where we do have low bandwidth. We have a lot of people that don't have to focus on accessibility. Our primary membership is usually the UX UI team, a whole group. It's a very large group actually, but a lot of them come. I did have it at one point a requirement for all quality engineers, accessibility or not, they have to attend one. So we'll see them come in. They'll come in and they'll come to the one that they're required for, and that's fine. And then otherwise, my team, the accessibility quality engineers, we're always there. Then there's a lot of people that come in because they like the topic. And they come in every time, and they're not necessarily affiliated with engineering at all, or UX. They're affiliated with another aspect of the business at all, and they just want to learn, and they want to participate, contribute, or just they just enjoy it. So they're there. It's open to all. So it's very important to make sure that we're inclusive. So of course we're inclusive. We're going to let anyone we would like, and occasionally someone from a different department will say, what can I do? Where can I learn more so that I can maybe work with you?
Great, thank you. And Jeff, I think this question is more for you, but Caroline, if you have anything to add, please feel free to jump in. Do you have any tips or best practices on how to provide more accessible meetings for internal or external meetings that are with people with disabilities? And then in parentheses, known or not?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so I think one is that I hope that we learned from COVID is that by having a remote option is really helpful / essential depending on the individual situation. There's just so many reasons why a remote option would really make things so much more inclusive for a range of situations. So unfortunately, I am starting to see that drop off in some cases where there's only an in-person option. And so I hope we hold on to this. It does require a little bit more technology and planning to make sure that it happens correctly. But I'd say like trying to offer both of those options as much as you can is important. Trying to think I think that by having a clear agenda for meetings in advance, and if there's any documents that you can share in advance, it lets people know, is this meeting worth my time? And two, how can I prepare for it? How can I enter in with the right state of mind? And also maybe there's a few things I want to look up or prepare so that I can be a valuable contributor to this meeting. It also helps people with cognitive issues where maybe they're not as good at kind of in the moment ascertaining what are we talking about? What's my role to play here? If there's a deck or a slideshow, for example, to be able to see those things in advance, because sometimes the screen flips by or the material is gone before you've had a chance to read it and comprehend it. So yeah, those are just a few things that come to me right away, but I'd love to hear what anyone else has to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, just
go ahead.
oh, sorry. Real quick, I'll just say some of the sort of standard answer stuff applies as well. Like make sure if if you're sharing a slide deck, that you're speaking out and verbalizing what's on the slides, not just speaking over them, because if someone can't see them, like that makes it a little less inclusive if there's important information in the slides that you're not saying. Things like, you know, just like, I lost my train of thought. Carolyn, please go.
Just want to make sure transcripts are always on. A lot of people actually have commented to me that they want them. Now, that it's just a good practice to always do that. Also, I want to say that recording that meeting is good because you can do a lot with that information, and a lot of times it's going to be not going to be high level, and you want to look at that again, and you'll have a recording to do so.
Thank you. You saved me. I couldn't think of any of the other options, and those are definitely the big ones.
Thank you all. And unfortunately, we're at the top of the hour, so we're out of time for questions. But once again, I want to thank all of you for such a great presentation. It was wonderful to have this discussion throughout the hour and seeing all the questions in the Q&A. I know that IAAP certifications were mentioned a lot, so I just want to drop in the chat a link to the certification overview page. And if you have any questions, you can sign up for one of our certification drop-in sessions. I think the next one is coming up on June 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern. I also want to thank our captioner, Katie, and our sign language interpreters, Beth and Lizzie, for their great work as always. And for upcoming IAAP webinars, we have on July 17th, a practical approach to increasing and sustaining accessibility maturity, and that is part of our digital accessibility series. Then on August 7th, we have batteries included accessibility, a pragmatic guide to get started today, and that is part of our subject matter expert webinar. And then on August 21st, another digital accessibility series webinar, project manager / product owner, crucial roles in an accessibility program. And for those who are not yet a member of IAAP, we welcome you to join our network of over 6,500 accessibility professionals in over 100 countries. All IAAP members get complimentary access to live professional education webinars, as well as our library of archived webinars, access to our Connections networking platform, free courses, and more. And anyone who's interested can sign up at accessibilityassociation.org or email info@accessibilityassociation.org to learn more about how you can become an IAAP member today. Once again, thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.